You are listening to Brothers of the Serpent podcast at Contact at the Cabin 2019.
And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, angels and demons, monsters and serpents, to Brothers of the Serpent podcast, coming to you not live from the basement of the beautiful Elk Lake Lodge in Colorado, where we are here at the Contact at the Cabin 19 with the Grimerica guys, Randall Carlson, Brad Young, and all the CAC attendees. We're like a cult. We're driving around in white vans, and we all pour out, and we're like, oh yeah, look at this weird geology, and this has been badass. So we're going to do our basic, just kind of standard intro. You're probably going to hear everyone talking in the background. We're down in the basement by ourselves, but there's a shitload of people upstairs. Yeah. You might hear some talking and just general audience back there.
We got the third and final group of CAC attendees showing up as we speak.
Yeah, that's right. So we have a little bit of downtime here, and we're taking advantage.
Yeah.
So the plan is we're gonna do just a short intro here. We're gonna do some space weather news and stuff, but we are also the rest of the podcast is gonna be a big roundtable with everyone.
Yeah.
So
come on down.
That's right. And without further ado, we have space weather news from spaceweather.com. Solar minimum conditions are in effect. The sun has been without sunspots for 78 days so far this year, more than half of the time in the year. To find a similar number of blank suns, you have to go back to 2009 when the sun was experiencing the deepest solar minimum in a century. Solar minimum has returned, bringing extra cosmic rays, long-lasting holes in the sun's atmosphere, and strangely pink auroras. Also, noctilucent cloud season begins. NASA's AIM spacecraft has spotted wispy patches of electric blue drifting over the Arctic Ocean. This marks the beginning of the 2019 season for noctilucent clouds, or NLCs. The clouds are boxed in this polar image recorded by AIM's CIPS instrument. And there's an image here, which I will probably not put in the show notes. Go to spaceweather.com to find it. These first detections from space are small and faint. They won't remain faint for long, however. Previous data from AIM have shown that NLCs are like great geophysical light bulbs. They turn on every year in late spring, reaching almost full intensity over a period of 10 days. This means observers on the ground should soon begin to see them. NLCs are Earth's highest clouds. Seeded by meteoroids, they float at the edge of space more than 80 kilometers above the planet's surface. The clouds are very cold and filled with tiny iced crystals. When sunbeams hit those crystals, they glow electric blue.
Wow, so, that's crazy.
Noctilucent clouds.
So you're going to be able to see them everywhere? Like,
well, no, I mean, you can see them. You can see them almost anywhere. Yeah, but they're pretty rare, But This is the season, basically. So early season NLCs are always found at high latitudes: Canada, British Isles, Siberia, Scandinavia. To people in those areas, we offer the following observing tips. Look west 30 to 60 minutes after sunset when the sun is dipped below the horizon. If you see luminous blue-white tendrils spreading across the sky, you may have spotted a noctilucent cloud.
Ah, that's awesome, man.
Check this out. That's the picture.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
So we probably won't be seeing them
in Texas.
But we're in Colorado.
Right, we are in Colorado.
Over the next 10 days, though. We'll only be here for 4 more days.
Yeah.
But, we'll keep a sharp eye.
Yeah, keep a sharp eye out for those NLCs.
I mean, you could post that on the show notes. Come on, man.
Yeah, I'm just got so much other stuff to do, like hang out with Randall Carlson.
Yeah. It's been great.
Yeah. So Randall's been given presentations that are absolutely mind-blowing. We've been going on these expeditions to Chimney Rock to look at the astronomy and the ancient cultures there. Mesa Verde, which is like just almost impossible to describe. The enormous canyons cut into this uplifted plateau like this. It's a mesa. It's uplifted, and then there are these amazing canyons cut into it. And then in the overhangs down in the canyon, there's just like cities in these overhangs. You walk up to the edge, you look down, there's this enormous city hiding behind a cliff overhang.
Massive overhangs.
Freaking badass.
And we've been taking a lot of pictures, so we'll be probably, I don't know. You never know what kind of conversation you're going to get into with people here.
Right.
Every single one of them, however, is awesome.
That's right. Yeah.
It's been the coolest gathering of like-minded people that I've ever been to.
Yeah.
And each person, there's each group has so far we've been through 2 different groups, and each one has a totally different vibe about the group. But it doesn't matter.
Right.
Like every person you get into a conversation with, you know,
Yeah.
it ends up being fascinating and great. And there's
Right.
a lot of laughs, a lot of great sense of humor.
Yep.
Senses of humor.
Senses of humor.
Sense of humors. I'm going to pluralize that thing.
Yeah, I've been saying, like, you can basically just walk up to somebody and be like, pyramids. And they're like, yeah. And then you start talking. And it just works. Like, that doesn't normally work anywhere else.
There's been so many great laughs.
The whole thing has been amazing. The cooking, the breakfast, and the lunches that they've been making for us are amazing. And
The tours, the casual conversations with everybody, with Randall.
Yeah.
We've actually been having a couple of jam sessions with Randall.
Randall brought a drum. I can't remember what it's called, but it's like a Middle Eastern style or Indian style.
I'm
drumming.
racking my brain for the name of this
Yeah,
drum.
it starts with a D, and I can't remember what it is.
Yeah.
Drum. It's drum.
But yeah, so we've been having little jam sessions. The first jam session got cut short by Brad.
Yeah, that's right. Randall, the wrath of Brad is what he called it. Yeah. Randall was like sort of showing us a little bit on his drum, and I went and got mine, which is a huge mistake. And I came up there and I was like, okay, you start your thing and I'll get it. And we started jamming and we're like, yeah, fuck yeah. And Brad is coming down the stairs and like, hey.
He's
And
trying to say be quiet.
Yeah,
and
and we don't hear him. And then he gets closer and he's like, hey. And we still don't hear him. We're rocking out, looking at each other. And then he gets right up next to me and he's like, hey. And we both like, oh, shit. So yeah, we got busted, really, really seriously. And Brad was giving us shit about it for it the next day, and Randall was like, "Well, you know, I was only 50% of the problem."
That's right.
That's true. I was the other 50%.
So we had a jam session at 2 a.m. last night.
Right.
And Brad was like, hell yes. And he put his camera up there, you know.
That's right.
It's been so great. I don't have any news stories other than everything that's been going on here is great.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is going to be just a short segment because the main purpose of this podcast is to have a CAC roundtable. So,
Yeah.
So I think we'll just close it out from there. And when we come back from the break, we will have everybody in here and we will just talk about whatever the hell we want to talk about.
Yep.
All right.
See ya in 30 seconds.
Later. All right, everybody's here. This Brothers of the Serpent podcast. We got Randall, we got Brad, we got Alan. We have Graham, we got Kyle,
We got
Adam, and then all the CAC peeps around us. Say what's up, people. Stay Rosa.
Is that a ringer?
It should be.
Yeah. So, Randall.
Sir.
First of all, did you learn what you wanted to learn coming here?
I learned that there was a lot more to be learned.
Ah, well, that's always a good thing to learn.
Yeah. I did learn that much.
So what was your? So okay. You had a goal for coming here, right? You wanted to investigate this whole area.
Yes,
So-
I did. Well, mainly because I haven't spent enough time here yet to really understand the geography and the history of the place. So it was an opportunity for me to do that.
Right.
I've never visited Mesa Verde, so I've now visited it 3 times. And yes, I'm going to go home with a lot of new information to digest and think about and try to integrate into the big picture of global change, cultural change,
Yeah.
all the things that we've seen out here imprinted in the landscapes.
Yeah.
I can't say I've had any, any revelations, but one big revelation, maybe a lot of little revelations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I definitely think the thing you were pointing out about how the mesa itself, like those canyons just start And that is a very strange thing. Like the canyons go all the way across this Mesa Verde, and they're cut across it like crazy. And then, but when you're looking at the north end, they just begin, and they're already big. You're like, okay, how did this happen?
Yes.
So that's one mystery I'm definitely going to be looking into when we get back too.
Yeah. So I think there's twofold things here: the geology of the region, which is a story, and then the cultural history of the region, which is another interesting story in its own right.
Yeah.
But the two are certainly intertwined with one another, particularly as we saw how the erosion of the Mesa complex was utilized by the Chacoans.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. This is the same thing with Chimney Rock, which is the other site we went to multiple times.
Yeah.
So there were like natural structures there that they
Yes.
used to correlate things to astronomy.
Uh-huh.
And like you kept pointing out, you don't need to do that kind of specific astronomy to farm.
No. It's good to know some astronomy, but you can make it much simpler with simply putting a stick in the ground to determine the seasons. You don't need to go to the tremendous amount of effort and work that we saw displayed at Chimney Rock.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. Brad?
Hey.
What was your impression of the whole thing?
Well, I was thinking revelation for me is just the fact that we can bring these people together, you know, from as far and wide as they came, and it's been an awesome group.
It has been fantastic.
You know, just that there's the like-minded folks that want to move things forward and want to look at these deeper history issues.
Yeah.
It's gratifying and inspiring in lots of ways, so I'm excited about this first one.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's definitely been mind-blowing, and for me, is just how amazing this whole group is, every single person, and the conversations that happen throughout just the whole time we're together. There's just like you can go from one group to the next, and they're all talking about
pyramids.
Yeah. How did they get here?
Yeah. You can walk up to anybody here and be like, pyramids, and they're like, oh yeah, and conversation starts. It's freaking awesome. I've been saying that all week. It's amazing.
It works every time.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Graham?
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. I learned a lot about the extensiveness of this ancient culture that I never knew about in school, like how much there is of these ancient sites.
Oh, yeah.
And then learned a lot from Randall, of course, and then I learned a lot from conversations with everybody. We had fascinating conversations.
Yeah, fantastic conversation. But you guys, well, you two, like Graham and Darren, who isn't here, unfortunately, and Charles. I'll get it right.
No, he's going to change it like 5 times before we're done.
Don't give it away.
Yeah, I was talking about Neil.
Someone else, right?
It's
yeah,
Neil.
Yeah. Neil,
That
guy's the one that keeps changing his name. Yeah. So you guys put in a lot of work to set this up, and it's been a 100% fantastic success.
I didn't do much. I mean, honestly, it was Alan, Charles, and Brad and Randall and Darren that put it together. And,
okay.
And you guys helped a lot.
So you didn't do anything? Get out of here. What are you doing here?
I was supporting Darren the whole time.
Okay.
In many ways.
Right.
Graham has provided a lot of emotional support.
Oh, all right. Okay.
Just
That's
with his
cool.
very presence.
Thanks, Randall.
Just his But yeah, this was like you guys set this whole thing up. I mean, I don't know exactly how it was because I wasn't there at the very beginning, but it's been amazing.
But you did save the day.
Wow, thank you.
Well,
I'm not sure how I did that. I almost killed everybody driving. That was several times. So, we're gonna do it again?
Yeah, hopefully. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'd like to.
What do you guys in the back think?
Ideas.
We're gonna do it again?
Yes. 100%. Yeah. Good.
They're just talking
I mean,
it up because some of them have already pre-registered.
Oh, okay. All right. There you go.
Yeah.
So tell us, Charles, what do you have going on with the pre-registration? How does that work?
That's pretty simple. You just go on to badcomment.com and pre-register, and we have a deal for the first few. And you're going to get no information at this point.
Officially.
But like I say, people are pre-registering now that are here.
Yeah.
And so when we figure out the details, we have a launch date, all that.
Okay.
We'll figure out by this date. If you don't want to go then, you get all your money back. No big deal.
Right.
But we are we are building the interest in the place you can go
Yeah.
to register for it if you want to go. And you don't have to pay that. You can just register without paying the money. But
Yeah.
if you want a slot and get onto any future talks we may do,
Yep.
The Zoom talks
you buy
possibly.
your, you buy your pre-registration and you may hear Randall.
Right.
After
And
this.
be able to interact with Randall on Zoom. Yeah. That was a lot of fun leading up to the whole thing. Right.
Oh, right, the Monday nights.
Yeah.
You have to excuse me. You know, I was up taking a nap until somebody woke me up 15 minutes
Yeah.
ago.
Sorry about that.
Come down here and blow our minds. After
Yeah.
I'm sitting here on this comfortable couch.
Like
Trying not to finish my
nap
nap.
time again. Well, so we've like throughout the time we've talked several times about maybe the Scablands, because
Yeah.
you guys know the Scablands, right?
We know Scablands.
Yeah.
Large part of the territory,
Yeah.
10 times.
Yeah, that would be great to see. But also, what I've been
mountains.
thinking about this whole time is like continuing your research, using the trips like these or tours like these to continue your research to continue to go to new places. I mean, it would be great for you to take people to places that you've been so many times, and I'm sure you can learn new things every time you go. But
Oh, yeah.
continuing the research, seems
Look the mountains.
Yeah.
for example.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The advantage, of course, is going to somewhere we're really familiar with, and there's less uncertainty, and we would be able to plot out an itinerary where we really know where we're going, how long it's going to take to get there, where we should stay. And in a Scablands trip, I would expand it to say a trip of the Great Pacific Northwest floodlands.
Oh, yeah.
And that could take us from anywhere from the Columbia Gorge all the way to western Montana. So the way to do that would, I think, rather than parking ourselves in one place, we would actually use two places. We would stay at one place 3 or 4 days, and then, for example, in eastern Washington, then move over to western Montana for 3 or 4 days. And that
man.
way we could really get the whole scale and scope of the phenomena.
Awesome.
Because there's a lot to see.
How about
I've-
just
sorry,
how
go
about
ahead.
just tying you down to a chair in a nice big living room and having you do presentations all day long?
You're asking me how about that?
Lightly tied.
Hold his eyelids open. That's
Yeah.
really warm.
Keep talking. Tell us about the moon.
I've heard you say multiple times throughout your presentations and while we've been on these excursions that, you say, well, if I had a whole week with everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what do you think the model, like after doing this, you think the model going forward would be
A week.
entire week
More time.
With the one group.
Yeah, I mean, we could really get a lot deeper into it. With one group over 1 week. Yeah, we
Yeah.
certainly could. And really, to do the floodlands up in the Northwest, I really think it would take that to get this picture and
Right.
the awesome scale of the phenomena. When you're looking at stuff there in Washington, say in the Columbia Gorge, and then you're driving hundreds of miles over to, northern Idaho, eastern Washington, and you're still seeing the same phenomena. Because basically what we would do is we would, like, one of the ways Brad and I have approached it is to follow the path of the flood, as if we're in a raft.
Oh, man.
Being carried. And then, so as you go through the landscapes, the idea is to be able to identify the fingerprints and the footprints. I kind of differentiate in that footprints are obvious. You see them
Okay.
inscribed into the landscape. Fingerprints are a little less obvious. You have to kind of know what you're looking for and have some training. But
Got a dust
by a
form.
combination of the two, you can trace the floods. And of course, the objective that I would be trying to convey to people is that the source of these floods is not where conventional science has been putting it.
Right.
And that really they have been using an sort of an artificial construct to constrict the magnitude of the floods. And the scale of them is actually much larger than.
Okay. Yeah. I think I've heard you talk about that, like that the Missoula flood thing may actually be, it was a water dam rather than an ice dam. Didn't you say that? That you think the reason it backed up so deep in there is because there was so much water?
So much water coming out of the rapidly melting Cordillera and ice sheet to the north.
Yeah.
To the north. I think that's where you ultimately have to go to look for the source of these floods.
Wow.
Is up in the Canadian Rockies and even further north. That's why we spent several expeditions up there exploring the evidence for large-scale southward flows of meltwater. But that would be too much. I mean, to bring in that part of it really would take, say, 2 weeks.
Okay.
Because there's so much. We went up to Prince George on the Chaco Plateau country a few years ago, and that appears to have been one epicenter of melting, with lots of large-scale meltwater currents flowing outwards in all directions from that plateau region. Also, it seems like the Fraser Plateau as well. And then when you cross the Continental Divide, you still find more evidence of huge floods that would not be considered at all part of the Missoula floods.
Right.
And the Missoula floods were ultimately headed towards the Pacific Ocean. When you cross the eastern, what I call the Athabasca floods, that left the big rocks that that we visited with the Grimerica boys, those floods were headed to the Gulf of Mexico.
So what about a mound strip? Like, how long do you think that would take?
Oh, a mound trip we could do, that could be done, you know, you could do a pretty awesome mound trip in 3 to 5 days.
Yeah. And that's like go ahead.
So we could do it similar to this one where you have trimesters.
Yeah, that would be more realistic for that. I mean, if we were going to do, you know, explore up in the Ohio River Valley area, do places like Serpent Mound or Newark, or some of the other places that are, just depends on how much we wanted to cover. You know, because there's a huge complex up and down the Mississippi River Valley. Right. Cahokia, which is one of the largest mound complexes, with the Monk's Mound there. Right, isn't that now considered to be the largest?
I think
Monk's
Earth
Mound,
mound?
yeah.
Monk's Mound, yeah.
But yeah, you could do a week, but you could also cover a lot in 3 to 4 to 5 days. So that could be a little bit less ambitious of a trip.
Yeah.
And then, you
But
know.
still awesome.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, definitely.
That would be
Plus,
amazing.
there's other things that could kind of add a little variety. Like if we're in that general region, there's Middlesboro, Kentucky, which is an astrobleme with a town inside of it.
Wow.
And that's kind of an interesting stopover.
Definitely.
Yeah, there's actually a number of astroblemes down in the southeastern area. Boulder fields, huge block deposits. A lot of people who don't understand how much serious erosion there is throughout the southern Appalachians, and the block fields that, well, you know, when you have stones that are the size of this room stacked up, that tells you that something happened.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, there's a lot to see. Thing about that, the east there is, you know, a lot more trees, a lot more rain and vegetation, so things are a little harder to see.
Okay, yeah.
So if you're going to go for the geology, a lot of times late fall or early spring is a good time. The mounds, you know, you could do that almost any time. A lot of the mounds are, you know, now parks or national historical sites, and they're kept up, you know, that you can go visit pretty much any time of year, I guess. But yeah, one could certainly put together a really interesting trip, and it could complement the trip we did here, as I tried to show in some of the presentations the other night. You know, the last phenomena of mound building was more or less concurrent with the last phases of the Chacoan culture enterprise that we've been looking at for the last week.
Yeah. So what about, we also have mentioned several times a type of Grail trip. That would be Scotland.
That'd be a little more involved.
Yeah.
That would probably take, to do that, once you get over there, might as well try to get at least 10 days in.
Yeah.
Maybe 2 weeks.
And that would be the British Isles and
Yeah, that would
France.
be following all the sites that are associated in one way or another with the Grail legends and the Grail stories. So that would include, you know, Roslin Chapel in Scotland. It would include multiple sites, Glastonbury in England, several other sites. In France, it could include Chartres Cathedral, It could include Rennes-le-Château. It could include Carcassonne. It could include Lourdes. It could include Ande. There's a whole bunch of sites that in one way or another are linked directly to the Grail mythos. So yeah, that could be a pretty interesting trip.
Yeah, that sounds.
Dangerous.
I've already figured it out.
He's already got it planned.
Every other 3 weeks.
Cue the Indiana Jones music.
Do it again.
Let's go.
Well, I ran it by Hancock, and he said Roslyn's the start.
You said what?
Roslyn.
Roslyn.
Yeah.
Is a serious one, yeah. And
Yep.
Sharp.
To start.
Okay.
And a trip like that would require definitely doing something like we were doing Monday nights with the Zoom conference, but maybe
Yeah.
even a little more organized or formal in the sense that there'd be a lot of background information
Okay, yeah.
to get to people beforehand, and maybe even a reading assignment, give them certain translations of some of the Grail stories
Yeah.
to kind of immerse themselves in the few weeks leading up to the trip.
That's a
Because I think that would make it
Yeah.
a whole lot
and then
richer.
we can test
Send
them.
us to school.
And then we can
Love
test
it.
them when they get on the conference, and if they fail, you're out. Can't fucking
So
go.
what we would do is we would go to Chateau de Montreal, which is a sheer pinnacle where the Templars held their initiations. It's in southern France in the Pyrenees.
Oh man.
And there's a mountaintop. Now, it may have changed since I was there last, which was quite some time ago. But to get to the top up there, you go up a narrow trail up the side of the mountain, and then there's the last, maybe 50 yards or so, you have to crawl through a tunnel and then emerge from the top. Emerge at the top out of this tunnel, and then you're up in the ruins of the chateau. So we would bring folks up there, and we would give them the test.
All right. That's okay.
where
I was
we're
like,
going.
I think he's still going on with the joke, but I wasn't sure. That's where you give him the test.
We'd give them a test.
Okay. And if they fail,
Well, we'll just
throw
leave
'em over
that
the edge.
Unspoken.
oh, okay. All right. Should say no more. Don't fail.
So there's also been some talk about Lake Nipigon, and you talked about that in the Zoom conferences. Had y'all
Yeah.
ever been there?
Yes,
yet.
as a youngster, I was there, and it's up along the north shore of Lake Superior. And yeah, the idea to go there would be to examine and explore the basin for evidence of it having been one of the impact sites of the Younger Dryas impact site. So if we have some time tonight, I would like to do like maybe just 15 or 20 minutes. So that's all it would take to just give a little sneak preview of what a Nipigon trip would involve.
Oh, we got time.
yeah. We got time.
Oh yeah, we have time for
We
that.
have time.
Okay.
Yeah.
There'd probably have to be a research trip and recon before we started
If
taking
are you
people up in there.
sorry, would you want to present that with your slideshows, like what the trip would entail?
Yeah,
Okay, cool.
yeah.
So if we do that, we'll add that to this video podcast.
Yeah.
We'll put it on YouTube and add that
Good
as part
idea.
of the video
You can totally do that. Yeah.
for this podcast. That would be cool.
Absolutely.
Oh man, really exciting.
And the Nipigon trip, typically during the season, it could involve some canoeing
Sweet.
to some sites.
Kayak. Can I use a kayak?
Well, yeah. Although I'm more familiar with canoeing, and that is canoe country up there.
Okay.
You
But
take
yeah.
more stuff with you in a canoe.
You
Yeah,
can
that's
carry
true.
more stuff in a canoe. This is true.
That's true. I'll have to think about it.
When in Nipigon.
So the thing to do on
Nipigons do. Okay.
would be to rent a lodge, I'm thinking initially 4 or 5 days would probably be adequate for the preliminary recon. And I would be doing a lot of research and studying beforehand to really narrow down the range of sites. But basically the idea is that you've got this deep lake basin. It's sort of elliptical. It's got a raised rim around it, and it's got evidence of gigantic outburst floods issuing from the basin. There are conventional explanations for that I believe have inconsistencies in them, and the idea would be to explore another idea that the floods issuing out of the basin were actually the result of that the floods and the excavation of the basin were part of the same process, and that it was a potential impact site, Younger Dryas boundary impact site. That's what that would be primarily looking at. But there's a lot of really incredible landscapes up there, as you'll see in the when we do some images after a while.
Okay, cool. So would we be looking for for crater structure, or is that going to be too?
Well, are you a certified scuba diver?
Not
Can
yet.
You be certified? Because
We
to
can
do
get
that, we'd have
I
to
can
be
get
able
certified.
to scuba dive to the bottom of the lake. It's about 400 feet deep, so
So we need a bell.
you would need a bell.
Yeah. Oh, I'll go down there in a bell.
No, we would have to pretty much look around the surface, around the shores of the lake. And there are some places where there may be evidence that have no roads to them. That's where the canoes would come in.
Okay.
I think also we would need to make sure that Brad hits all of the dangerous places to stand, and we can take
Yeah.
photographs of that.
We'll be out in the middle with our
Absolutely.
canoes, and Brad can stand on all the dangerous spaces around it, and we can take pictures from the middle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's what Brad is mainly about.
That's Brad's job. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's become clear. on
Relative
this trip.
size guy.
Yeah, he is relative size guy.
See, we still need the suit.
They're all cutouts, actually.
We still need the suit.
Just stand up Brad cutouts and. Well, Brad still has to put the cutouts up there, so.
No, we don't know why he does it.
Oh. Okay. They just show up.
Yeah, I have a whole collection of Brad in precarious situations that
Yeah. Yeah.
we can
Exploit.
supplement.
Yeah, you definitely
Got
need to.
another one yesterday though.
Yeah, got
Yeah.
another one yesterday. Got one today.
That's
Yeah.
a highlight.
Yep.
Oh yeah,
So-
today too.
Yeah.
Is
Today.
there a world record involved here?
You're looking to get in Guinness.
Yeah, so the
Stood
most
in the most precarious places in the world.
stand at the bottom of Lake Nipigon, and we'll take your picture.
Yeah. In a bell.
It's a 2-person bell.
Now, for a Lake Nipigon trip, most likely people would probably fly into the Twin Cities and then drive from there up. But maybe fly into Duluth, which is at the southern end of Lake Superior. But then there would be that drive along the north shore of Lake Superior, which is pretty impressive. And then cross the border into Canada and then go up to Thunder Bay. And that Thunder Bay, when you get to Thunder Bay, just beyond that is where the great flood landscapes are. And then follow those flood landscapes up to the lake itself. There's a series of coulees and dry cataracts and things like that, slot canyons. You'll see pictures shortly when we do that.
Awesome.
The slideshow.
And by the way, going to Canada requires a passport
Oh, yeah.
for Americans
Get-
now.
get a
so
passport.
Yes, it does. Thank
Going
you.
on that trip, got a
Benevolent
passport.
government of ours, looking after our well-being.
Yeah.
Looking out for us.
Papers. All right. What about an Antarctica trip?
Antarctic. Now,
Don't hold back.
well, that could be useful.
I'm just like
Alan's already got it figured out.
Next one is moon trip.
No, I canceled it. We're going to Coral Castle.
Oh, okay. Hey, I would love to go to Coral Castle.
The other trip that would be interesting would be an Atlantis trip.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, come on.
I think I could
Azores
exchange
or-
the Antarctica trip for an
Yeah.
Atlantis trip. Yeah.
To the Azores?
Azores.
Yeah, Azores and Madeira would be the principal.
Man.
Yeah.
I don't know if I like the next 6 years of life planned out.
6.
A lot of that sounds fun.
6?
Okay, one
One of those a year and a whole lot of other things in between.
yeah. So one at a time. But the idea is that you can, if you're interested, you can go to badcomet.com. You can register. You can pay, what is it?
It's $100.
$100.
Yeah.
And that's to guarantee your spot
In the next
in the
whatever.
very next trip.
Proof of life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or you can just sign up to get details of whatever is
Right.
going on.
So when a trip is decided on, when Randall decides where we need to go learn stuff, or whoever makes that decision, I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm just a guy over here
With
in
a
front of a
microphone.
microphone. So whenever all that stuff is decided, we send out the information and then go from there. And you, Alan, working your magic, pulling it all together. It's been fantastic.
Yeah.
So,
The whole organization of it, this whole thing has been great.
yeah. And the I guess Darren and Graham, y'all conceived the idea in the beginning to go
Party.
Yeah.
party. And how many times have y'all done this?
Well, this is the third year, but the first two were very small, and then the second was on the coast of Oregon with a bunch of. I mean, it was similar environment, just without Randall and his research and everything, and it was just great conversation and all. And then we thought Darren and Randall started talking, and I don't know who else.
I first talked to Darren on the phone.
Yeah.
I guess where were we? We were on a trip.
Well, yeah, he had already asked if we could go anywhere in the U.S. Where should we go? And I told him around Canyonlands or Durango, somewhere Moab to Grand Junction, and it just kind of went from there. So yeah, they called us when we were on our way to Minnesota.
Oh, that was it. Yeah.
So yeah, we think it worked out great. I mean, as long as Randall thinks it's good to have his kind of doing your research as well as sharing all your knowledge with all of us and kind of making it like a sort of like a an intimate conference type thing. I mean,
see it as a win-win. I mean, it's it helps cover my costs for doing the research.
Yeah.
Everybody has a good time. Everybody learns stuff.
Yeah.
Saw a lot of new things on this trip. We've been through this part of the country several times. It hadn't really sat down or stayed here for a week and spent the whole week learning about the environment here. So I'm going away with a lot of new information that I've picked up that I'm going to be digesting over the next few weeks. Yeah.
Hopefully, we threw some ideas at you too. I know that there's some groups.
Oh yeah, I mean,
who were really unique sort of suggestions and hypotheses about things. So.
Yeah, questions about how are 215,000 huge timbers transported across the desert?
Yeah.
Right. How is that accomplished? That's an interesting question.
With no wheel and all
Right.
the other stuff that they said. Yeah.
I mean, big 50-foot logs, carrying 50s. And, this week I climbed Chimney Rock 3 times. But you only need to climb it once to think about, hauling all those rocks up there. The amount of effort and work that went into it is just mind-boggling. And I certainly had a good grasp of that, but that was even more, that idea driven home more is the tremendous output of effort and labor and organization that was required to pull this thing off over those centuries, 1,000 years ago, and what it's left in the desert and the unanswered questions and the mysteries that still remain.
Yeah. There was a bunch of stuff that they were telling us. Well, the guides were cool. They did a lot of times say, well, we don't really know, and a lot of this is speculation. But
it was the interpretive tour. That's what they said.
Interpretive tour.
I appreciated that name.
Yeah. But there was just some of the stuff I just couldn't get behind, like the doors in your ceiling, in your roof. That I have a problem with that. I mean, maybe that's how they did it, but it just seems weird to me, like that you climb in, you get into your house, every room of your house. The only way to get into any room in your house is to go through the roof. And if you want to get into another room in your house, you have to climb out of that room onto the roof and over to the next door and back down into the room. And anytime you're doing that, you're climbing down a ladder that's right over the fire. That just seems
A bit of trouble with that.
like they built they built these enormous structures and they couldn't figure out doors. Seems weird, but maybe there was a reason. I don't know.
I'm going to assume that there was a reason, just for the sake of arguing about it. But I
So that we can argue.
Yeah, so we can argue.
All right, cool.
Yeah. Well, just like we've been arguing all week.
Yeah, we have been arguing all week.
As we're driving around an event, we're arguing.
Yeah, nonstop. It's nonstop arguing. Yeah.
That's been a lot of fun.
Yeah.
The van rides have been
Van
great
rides
fun.
been fantastic. Yeah. Yeah.
I actually, every time we went to Chimney Rock 3 times, Mesa Verde 3 times, I learned new stuff every time.
And saw new things.
Saw
each
new
time.
things each time.
Yeah.
And started to get, the stuff that, the basic idea kind of figured out, what the standard model is, but I also have problems with it. But it's still just a mystery, Like we went over all different types of ideas about these kivas possibly being, water catchment systems and stuff like that.
Yeah.
everybody has these ideas, and they're, you know, it was just really great to be able to have all these people really that actually care, you know, want to understand, and to be able to talk about it and see it together and hear everybody's different thoughts. I think it doesn't really matter where we go. It's always going to be like that. With this type of group of people.
That's
and it's
right.
just so great.
It's who you with, not where you are.
That's right. Sort of. It's like where you are
Where
is
you are
pretty
is
awesome.
good too.
We're not going to talk about the 55E problem. That's the code word for the problem. Anyway.
What? Is it? I don't even know what's going on.
Never mind.
Okay. I'm out. I don't know this joke. So. Yeah, but I agree. The people that have been here and throughout this whole thing, the conversations, the ideas, the laughter, you know, it's just been fantastic. It's been amazing. And you can be wrong. You're like, I think that's dumb. And then everyone's like, no, you're dumb because that's not, it like work like this. And you're like, oh shit. And everyone laughs and it's cool. No one cares, you know.
No one cares if you're dumb.
Right. That's right. That's really important for me.
I know.
That's really important to me.
Nobody cares if you're
I need
if
people
you're
around me
dumb,
to
Russ.
not care that I'm retarded.
Hey, I was going to take that joke.
And the other thing is the presentations you've been giving, Randall, every night for everyone, equally awesome.
Yep. Maids are still scraping brains off the walls upstairs.
Yeah. So we definitely love to see that Nipigon trip proposal.
Yeah. Or any of the other ones, mounds. I mean, I can't, like, we lived in Georgia for so long and never, you were showing those sites and we're just like, I can't believe we didn't go to those. But Macon,
Yeah.
we were close to Macon. We went through Macon many times.
Right there, Okmulgee Mound.
Okmulgee.
Yeah.
Mounds, plural. Etowah, which is just about an hour north of Atlanta. Beautiful, pristine site next to the Etowah River. And there is another one that I have not visited, Kolomoki in southern Georgia, which has got well-defined astronomical alignments worked into it. But again, I haven't visited that one, so I can't speak. You know, Okmulgee and Etowah, you know, visited probably a dozen times. Yeah, and then there's Moundville, Alabama, which is a pretty impressive complex.
Yeah. We did go to that one when we were children.
You did?
When we were very, very young. I don't really remember it, but
Okay.
yeah, we were like 12, 11, something like that. But aren't there, this is another thing we've been talking about, aren't there tools? There's a lot of stone tools around those sites, the mountain sites.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's the stone tools here seem to be lacking.
Mm-hmm.
And that's strange to us. Like down in Texas where we live, there are, you know, I don't know how many, just hundreds of thousands of campsites where these people camped, and they camped there for thousands of years. There were no structures that we know of, but there are like midden mounds from the fires, and then just all the stuff from where they were camping around the fires, and there are literally millions upon millions of stone tools of various types scattered around the surface, deep down into the ground, all the way down to Clovis, you know, or Folsom or whatever. And even if you don't find an arrowhead or whatever, there are chips everywhere from them trying to make making the tools. They're just fragments and chips and worked things everywhere. And here, there's
Very
nothing.
little of that.
Very little.
You know, there's the pottery.
And yeah, you have these big structures, and there were hundreds of complexes, and there were obviously large populations of people here. And then down in the canyons, there's like whole cities stuck in these overhangs, and there's just, where are the tools?
Of course, you wouldn't be, for earthwork structures, you know, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around how they executed some of these things, because they're truly monumental in scale.
Right.
And okay, maybe they did use wicker baskets filled with dirt, but let's also be open to the possibility that they had other means of moving hundreds of thousands of tons of earth.
Yeah.
And the other thing, of course, that's missing in all of this is the motive.
Right.
Yeah.
Why?
Why? I mean, anybody who travels, you can travel over the mound complexes of the Mississippi or Ohio valleys. You can travel over the Chacoan areas like we have here. And the more you do that and the more you realize the scale of this undertaking, the more you're, the more you have to ask, why are they doing this on the scale that we're seeing?
Yeah.
Like you said, you don't need to build a huge complex with hundreds of thousands of stones in it to know the seasons, to track the seasons, which is what, the agricultural explanation. There was clearly something beyond agriculture here.
Right. And you probably don't need to track the maximum and minimum lunar standstill things at all to do any agriculture, right?
I wouldn't think so.
I mean, it's just, unless there's something about that we're totally missing, which is possible, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, we've seen that. See, that was the thing. We saw that there at Chimney Rock.
Yeah.
Then we can travel over to Newark, Ohio, and see a huge earthwork complex covering many acres that's set up and is designed to accomplish the same precise thing, to track this 18.6-year cycle of the moon. And again, so the question that still I'm grappling with in my mind is the motive for this.
Yeah, I think they said the number of stones used in the complex at the top of Chimney Rock was 6 million.
Mm-hmm.
And try carrying 2 of those stones up that mountain.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
It was hard enough getting one down.
What?
And we drove the first 2.5 miles.
That's right.
We had the easy route.
Yeah. Yeah.
We just had the top 10%. Not even.
Without carrying a stone, it was hard getting up there.
How many people does it take to carry one of those logs? Like, how heavy is one of those logs?
One of the guys that gave us a tour, he was in the forestry, whatever, he used to be whatever those guys are called, forest guys.
It was Mr. Lovejoy.
The woods guys. The woods guys.
A ranger?
Yeah, so
it was
anyway, he basically said it would take, it would be 50 people, 25 people on either side of the log, right? Based on the weight per log foot, he was talking about average diameter and the weight per foot of log, and he was like, yeah, you mean you're gonna have to have 50 people to get one log up there, and that's on level ground.
We went hiking back here, and we're looking at one of the trees was down, one of the big fir trees that they're talking about. It's down on the ground, and we're standing around it, looking at it like, how do you even get 50 guys to sort of synchronize and try, like. We're standing on the side of a hill, and I'm like, think about trying to pick this thing up with 50 other dudes and trying to walk up that hill with this thing.
No chance.
After
and then carrying these huge ponderosa pine logs from there to Chaco Canyon.
Right, that's the other thing.
Away.
You're right. The exporting that they were doing to Chaco, not just building their own structures right there, but exporting them to Chaco.
Yeah, so there had to be some major motivation to do this. They're not just like, oh, this is a pretty spot. Let's build a hut,
Let's go 90 miles north of here and get some huge ponderosa pine timbers and haul them on our shoulders back.
Right, so we can build a hut.
For a view.
Yeah.
Yeah, for the view.
For the view.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it seems.
And
that's why we're doubling the gas next year, so we can get those logs up. There wasn't enough of us.
we need to do more science.
Yeah. Oh, I see. We need more attendees so we can try carrying one of the logs up there.
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
I tried to cut down.
I volunteered to take pictures while you guys.
I tried to cut down a ponderosa pine up on the hill behind the lodge with a rock. And in like 2 minutes.
How'd it go?
Yeah.
Oh, well, in about 2 minutes, my hand hurt really bad, and I barely made it through the bark. So.
Yeah.
Russ did the math and figured that like 4 or 5 guys could do it together probably in about 6 years. Yeah, some of these trees are just huge.
It seemed hard. Yeah.
The other interesting thing too about that, just the amount of effort. There was a story on one of the plaques at Mesa Verde, which is 2,000 feet in elevation above the river valley.
Mm-hmm.
That when they discovered the palace, all of the cliff dwellings in the late 1800s, somebody started doing tours right? Kind of like what we're trying to do, right?
Yeah.
What y'all are
I
trying to do.
think you did it.
Yeah. But they were taking people. It was 25 miles they had to go, and part of that was on with horse and buggies, and then the rest was the last 10 miles of that was on foot or on horseback. And they charged $15 a person, and they provided all the lodging and the food. And I was just shaking his head.
We're not doing that.
We're not doing it. It was a 3-day trip, but still, that kind of gives you a clue.
$15 was a lot of money back then.
It kind of gives you a clue, though. It was a 3-day trip to go from the river valley to, say, Cliff Palace, and then back down to the river valley. So that was with horse and buggy. That's with wheels.
Yeah.
I think it'd take them 3 days to get there and back without seeing anything.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the point is that's with wheels and beasts of burden. We're told that these people that built all this stuff had no wheels or beasts of burden, right? So you're like, how long did it take?
How long did it take them to go that 25 miles to get down to the river?
Carrying a giant log.
Well, I think we clearly need to try to get, say, 50 people together on our next trip, and we'll try it.
Okay.
We'll get a 3-foot ponderosa pine log.
Kyle and I were up there looking at that thing. We're like, what are the logistics of even getting this off the ground? You know, like there's nothing. They're so big around. You're on one side of the log or the other. How do you grab it?
You grab it and walk sideways like that.
Right, but you can't.
Crab walk that.
You gotta have calves like this.
Yeah.
It's calves.
Calves.
It's calves. Yeah.
Calves?
Calves.
But you can't even get your hands underneath. I don't know. It's like we were just trying to figure out how would you even do this?
Well, I want to ask you, the roadways were flat, pretty level? Is that
No,
correct?
not necessarily. They
at
were
all?
straight, but not necessarily level.
Okay. So I was thinking if they had walls, they could water it and float them down, but
Oh,
can't do it that way.
that's a fun idea though.
It was fun while it lasted.
Yeah. Still fun.
And the trip's almost over.
Yeah. This is the last day. We've been trying to podcast all week.
So what do we got on the agenda? Maybe a little bit about Lake Nipigon. We're gonna rock out for a little while.
Yeah. Randall's going to give a presentation. That's what you're saying on Nipigon.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're going to jam out.
We're gonna jam. Are we gonna jam?
I'm up for it. And then we could do just, question and answers. Anybody who wants to speak their mind about something should open the floor.
Yeah. Well, let's do that right now. Anybody
Alan
want
was
to?
saying we should have a more, what was the term you used?
Probably slack. I'm not
Slack.
sure. Let's take it easy tonight. We've had this has been quite the
So we're
thing.
slacking. We're going to slack tonight.
Well, I don't want to. Everybody's off the clock, so let's just talk,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
All right, sounds good.
Yeah.
That's
Does
fine.
anybody else want to say anything? Add stuff? You guys out there?
Don't be shy.
Don't be shy.
Uh-oh.
Speak up.
I just want to say thank you to all of the hosts and all the podcasters. It's a fan heaven to be with such astute and intelligent and articulate people that have such diverse and observant opinions, and it's been wonderful and growth experience for me, and thank you very much.
All right. Thank
I
you.
so appreciate it. I'm signing up for the next time.
All right.
All right. Yeah.
All right.
I think she must have won one of the contests.
Yeah, she probably did win.
I say that.
Yeah. Speaking of articulate.
Yeah.
That was very
That
well
was very well
spoken.
spoken and said. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
All right.
Thanks everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Can't wait to do it again.
All right, that was our roundtable with Randall, Brad, Charles, and Graham, and also Adam, who was there but didn't say anything. Yes, spoke not a word.
That's pretty amazing, guy. I can't seem to be able to ever do that.
So coming up next, we have Randall's Lake Nipigon presentation, which was the last presentation he gave at the Contact at the Cabin conference, and it was fantastic.
Yeah, and we will be putting a video of the screen that he was using for the presentation on the YouTube. So check that out, because he is going to be describing a lot of stuff that everybody in the room can see.
Right.
So
so Brad was kind enough to give us the video that he took of Randall's screen, and Brandon will be kind enough to add that to our YouTube video.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks, History Shift. All right, here we go. Lake Nipigon.
Thanks, all. Now, this has been very special to me too. All the conversations we're having and all the people that we've met over the 3 trimesters, and like all the relationships we'll have for for life with some of these people. It's been amazing. And you guys are all amazing, and amazing conversations, and it's just the best part about this whole thing. So yeah, thanks everybody. Oh yeah, feedback too. If you guys have any feedback, we're open to hear about it.
I just want to say, for me, it started with that phone call that Darren made to me. Brad and I were on our way to a to a Masonic retreat in Minnesota last fall. The phone rang, and we just happened to have a signal at that time as we were driving, and I answered. It was Darren, and he proposed the idea to me. And initially, I thought, sounds pretty good, but I'll see if he actually pulls it off and comes through. I'll say yes, because what's the risk, Well, then, as the months went by, and it became apparent that you guys were actually putting it together, and it might actually come to fruition. And then as the countdown began, I started thinking, what have I gotten myself into? Here I am, I'm leading my peaceful life. Everything's routine. I know what I'm going to be doing tomorrow and who I'm going to be talking to. And
walking down the street, minding your own affairs.
Walking down the street, minding my own affair.
Bothering no one.
Exactly. You got that. Then there was the drive out here. That was an ordeal. 26 hours nonstop, which was interesting. So the first few days that I was here, see, you guys were kind of lucky in a way, because the first group, I was completely fried. I was fried hockey boogie for those first 3 days. Trying to go, okay, let's see, what was I going to talk about? And that was like 30 seconds after I'd started talking about it. So
we couldn't even tell.
Yeah.
But really, I guess if I had one thing that I kind of didn't feel quite completely 100% about, was the fact we just didn't have enough time. Because we were able to go do Chimney Rock one day, we did Mesa Verde the next day, we did the falls today, but if we'd had another 2 or 3 days, there could have been so much more we could have done, included. But we do this, we try it, we learn, right? Isn't that a big part of it, learning? And so, we've got ideas. Brad and I have been doing this for 22 years now, but we've taken a lot of people, probably as many as in this group, but not all at once. So up until this point, the biggest group we'd had was 8, including Brad and myself, which turned out to be great. And we rented a house on Moses Lake for 4 days. Moses Lake is in Washington, and from there we were able to make day trips out. And then the other half of the trip, we were just kind of staying different places wherever we happened to be, which of course wouldn't work so good with a group this big. However, what we could do is have actually 2 places where we spend 3 to 4 days in each place, exploring the local area. Then we pick up, say in Washington, eastern Washington, and we go over to Montana. And John, who is here, he lives in Montana, and he knows a lot about the country around there and has personal contacts, which I thought was really cool. And then Brandon, here he lives right near Wenatchee, Washington, and so his backyard is right on some of the most awesome flood features on the planet. Wow. That's what he sees when he, right? Yeah. Wow. And he said, go ahead and get as many people, 70, 80 people. He would be glad to put us all up. So we thank you for that.
It's almost sold out.
forget to, I'd like to wish Renee and Tamara good luck in their new book launch as well.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, don't forget, you guys. Now, I've offered that if you need a reprinting and you need a new cover, I've offered a portrait of myself for the new.
Excellent.
No, never mind. I won't tell you any Graham Hancock jokes, but I have some. It takes a while to get under that, reserved, distinguished kind of British demeanor to get to the true Monty Python-esque entity that's really there. Okay. All right. So one of the potential trips, Bradley and I were going to undertake this trip last fall, and we were going to go with George Howard. I don't know how many of you know George Howard. I know you guys know George, right? Yeah, George is an awesome guy. Yeah. He runs the Cosmic Tusk website. We've done some field trips with him. He's also a founding member of the Comet research team, which has now grown to over 60 scientists internationally. So we were setting this up, and we were planning to go, and he had reached out and contacted John Shaw. Now, you guys probably know who John Shaw is, or was. John Shaw was probably the world's foremost expert on drumlins, which are a very important diagnostic landform for tracing and tracking and documenting evidence for gigantic megafloods. And what he did was propose that drumlins were formed by huge floods shooting underneath the ice sheets, forming the glacial till into these fluvial, boat-like, aerodynamic forms that look like almost inverted spoons or inverted boat hulls. And he was going to join us there. He had responded to George Howard and said he would love to join us there, but then regrettably, like a month later, he passed away. So he was probably in his 80s or late 70s. But what he proposed was a very controversial idea when he first proposed it in the 80s, just as J. Harlan Bretz's ideas of gigantic megafloods that he proposed in the 1920s just whipped up a storm of controversy and attempts to suppress. And there was one criticism of Shaw's theory that I thought was legitimate, and that was, just like with Bretz, his critics said, okay, so you say there's this big flood. Well, where did it come from? And he didn't really have an answer. So then his critics said, well, if you can't tell us where it came from, then there was no big flood. They did the same thing with John Shaw. They said, if you can't tell us where these gigantic subglacial floods came from, then they didn't happen. Well, what he was proposing was some kind of a reservoir that would have to form in the ice or on the ice, the great ice complex that existed at the end of the last ice age. And all of his critics savaged that and said, no, it wouldn't work. You can't store a significant volume of water on the ice. Now, this is ironic because this is what I've been saying for decades now about the prevailing theory about the Missoula floods, is because they're saying the conventional idea is that you had this massive lake, over 600 cubic miles of water, 2,100 feet deep, held in by glacial ice, right? Which could not be possible for a number of reasons we're not going to get into tonight because it just would take us too far afield. But they essentially said the same thing to John Shaw, and they were right about that. What they weren't right about, though, so they said, well, because there's no way to store, like one of John Shaw's subglacial floods required 80,000 cubic kilometers of water. That is just an astonishingly, that's like 20,000 cubic miles of water. That's like all the Great Lakes together multiplied by several times over, right? And they said there's no conceivable way you could ever accumulate that much water, right? And they were right. But see, now we have a different paradigm. This new paradigm is that, no, you don't have to create a slowly accumulating reservoir of meltwater that suddenly busts loose and, flows out and basically grounds half the landscape of North America. Because we now have a mechanism to induce instantaneous melting. Now, this gets us to the younger dryas impact hypothesis, which I wish we'd had more time to talk about.
because this is one of the most important scientific hypotheses out there at this point, in this day and age. And it's basically the idea that the Ice Age was ended by an impact or series of impacts, which is the model I lean towards. The collapse of the Clovis culture and the sudden mass extinction of all the great megafauna that lived in not only North America, but South America, Eurasia, right? So something really profound happened around 12,900 years ago. And something really profound happened again about 1,300 years later. And those two dates bracket what's called the Younger Dryas. Now, what's interesting to me is like 5 years ago, nobody but a small group of very highly specialist glaciologists and paleoclimatologists and so on knew the term Younger Dryas. Now millions of people know the term Younger Dryas. I'm constantly seeing the Younger Dryas coming up in conversations and things on the internet, people talking about it, which is very gratifying to me because I think I had a small part to play in helping getting this idea out there. The idea that our planet dramatically changed around 12 to 13,000 years ago. And the world we've inherited is a very different world from the world of our Stone Age, our Pleistocene ancestors. So one of the constant criticisms of the impact hypothesis from the critics is that, well, just like with the Cretaceous Tertiary boundary impact of 66 million years ago, that had to withstand a decade of withering attacks before it was finally accepted. The idea that there was a great impact on Earth 66 million years ago that destroyed the dinosaurs, right? Well, it's now been 12 years since the first scientific publication of the Younger Dryas, regarding the Younger Dryas impact. It's still not fully accepted. One of the reasons is that the KT boundary, when it was first proposed in 1980, didn't have a huge political facade to have to bust through. The Younger Dryas is much more political. Because for one thing, obviously 66 million years ago, there were no humans. 12,000, 13,000 years ago, there were humans, right? And also this idea is entrenched that humans killed off the megafauna. And this idea has been around for half a century, and it's kind of ebbed and flowed. It was pretty much on the way to being fully dismissed until about a decade ago. And then it got revived because it provided evidence that we humans were capable of perpetrating a mass slaughter on a planetary scale. And it fits right in with certain political agendas that are now very prominent. And so when this idea got proposed that maybe it was something from space that killed the megafauna, it was soundly rejected initially and attacked. But one of the principal criticisms and objections, just like with the KT boundary event, was, well, you got to show us a crater. That's the smoking gun. Well, you know that not so long ago there was a crater found under the Greenland ice sheet. It was, what, 19 miles in diameter? About that, yeah. Dating, though, is at this point too precise to say definitively that it was Younger Dryas. It very well could be. Apparently it's still hot under there, which means it's young. But we still don't know. Is it a Younger Dryas impact, or could it be of an impact 20,000 or 30,000? We don't know. But we're going to need to get more dating. But so what I began to do was to begin to look at the pattern of melting. And what I soon realized was the melting was not what you would expect from a traditional concept of glacier recession. Now, we had about 400 years of the Little Ice Age. We came out of it, the planet came out of it in the mid-19th century, and during the Little Ice Age, the 400 or 500 years of the Little Ice Age, glaciers worldwide grew to the greatest extent, get this, the greatest extent that they have been in 10,000 years since the end of the Great Ice Age. Well, modern glaciology was born with observations of the warming that came mid-19th century when these worldwide Little Ice Age glaciers began to recede. So one of the things that the scientists did was they said, okay, let's measure these recessional rates. Typically you might get anywhere from a few feet up to 20, 30, 40 feet per year, right? We look at these recessional rates, and what we see is that the ice basically recedes from its margin. We didn't get to go see the moraines in the Animas River Valley, we did take the first group there, so you could see moraines. Moraines form when the ice comes down. We talked about this, I think. Creates a mounded, arc-shaped mound, and then it recedes, and it creates this very distinctive glacial landform as the ice recedes, right? Well, so now we have what you would consider a normal glacial recession. That's what we've observed. You have outwash as the glacier recedes, volumes of meltwater outwash and create a nice, almost level plain, sometimes speckled with boulders and rocks and things. But when we look at the melting of the last ice age, it didn't really do that. It did it somewhat, but what we see is there seems to be two kinds of melting. And the key, I think, was John Shaw's work on drumlins, because the drumlins, there are massive drumlin fields up under where the ice would have been. And if you follow those drumlins, they emanate from epicenters. And many of those epicenters are occupied by extremely deep lakes, right? And so among these, the one I'm going to focus on first is Lake Nipigon. And it says, evidence for extreme melting and catastrophic flooding. So the following collection of maps and images have been retrieved from Google Earth, various internet sites, and journals as part of pre-reconnaissance research conducted prior to field investigations, which is what we had hoped to do last fall. But things got too complicated. So here's a general map of the Great Lakes region, and Lake Nipigon can be seen right here. Just almost north of Thunder Bay. Now, any drive, say from Minneapolis or Duluth to get up there would require driving along the north shore of Lake Superior, which is spectacular because Lake Superior was a conduit for huge volumes of meltwater. Here was one part, here was another part, and you can see the scouring on the floor of Lake Superior. In fact, if you could drain Lake Superior, the floor of it would look like the Channel Scablands of Washington. See? This is a huge wash of moraine across here, and then the erosion continues down into Lake Michigan, and so you had a huge subglacial flow coming this way, and then emanating down here, carving out what is now the Illinois River before it reached the Mississippi and ultimately flowed to the Gulf. You had other flows which we can look at later, but we're focusing on this right now, so let's go ahead. This is just a closer up so you can see some of the scouring that's on the bottom of these lakes. That scouring is indicative of highly pressurized subglacial meltwater, forcing its way under the ice sheet and then scouring the bedrock in the process, sometimes hundreds, even 1,000 feet deep. Some of these channels here on the floor of Lake Superior are gouged out 1,000 feet deep. Extreme scabland erosion on the floor of Lake Superior. Okay, so here's Lake Nipigon. And the black, it'll come to me. So surface area, 1,872 square miles, 60 miles from north to south, 40 miles east to west. Average depth's 180 feet. The maximum depth is 541 feet. And it's basically a bowl-shaped depression. And here we're just looking a little bit more of a oblique view. Lake Nipigon occupies a topographic bowl or basin with an upraised rim around it. The west rim of the bowl lies about 700 feet above the lake surface and about 1,200 feet above the deepest part of the lake. The northern part of the rim lies roughly 400 feet above the lake and about 900 feet above the lake bottom. The rim has a shallow saddle or col at the northeast quadrant up here that lies only about 150 to 200 feet above the lake surface. Then coming around clockwise, the rim begins to ascend in elevation, again to the east of the lake, and rises to above 1,500 meters above sea level in the southeast quadrant, right here. So now it says, see the next slide. So here are just some elevations you'll notice. 1,540, 1,540, right? Well, what this is showing us is that this was once continuous at the same elevation. And this particular area here, notice 746. So this is almost 750 feet lower. So there's a trough in here that's about 700 to 750 feet lower than the surrounding rim. And I'm going to skip this slide for now. Okay, so here's James Teller, a well-known paleohydrologist, geologist. So this was published in the University of Manitoba Bulletin in 2008. So he's talking about how, between 13,000, 8,000 years ago or thereabouts, the world's largest lake played an integral part in a catastrophe that changed the world. But what exactly was its role? Now, what he's doing is he's assuming that Lake Agassiz, which was this gigantic inland sea of fresh water, glacial meltwater, that drained in 3 different channels to the oceans, including up to the Arctic Ocean. It's a gigantic body of water. I mean, you literally wouldn't have seen across it. It would have taken you days to sail across it. It was like an inland sea. Okay. Part I want to call your attention to, so Teller researches past climate and hydrological changes using sedimentary records from lakes as a guide. His research primarily focuses on Lake Agassiz, its birth, death, and its outbursts in between. It's a formidable undertaking because of the complexity of the lake's history. But he goes, Teller was the first to publish that overflow from Lake Agassiz was periodically catastrophic. On our road trip with Graham Hancock, we took him to the outlet of Glacial Lake Agassiz, which is right down here on our way to the Twin Cities. And at that outlet, there's a lake and a town. The town is Big Stone, and the lake is Big Stone Lake. The reason is, obviously, because there's huge stones there. And huge stones, are, especially if they're rounded, as these are always an indication of a gigantic flood. Well, here's what he goes on to say. There was a fire, and the fire season was serendipitously harsh that year, and we saw acres of giant boulders and deeply eroded bedrock that led me to conclude that there had been a gigantic flush of water across that area from Glacial Lake Agassiz into the Great Lakes. Then in 1989, at the urging of oceanographers from Columbia University, blah, 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 he co-authored a paper for the journal Nature describing for the first time how 10,000 cubic kilometers of water burst from Lake Agassiz into Lake Superior near Thunder Bay and spilled into the Atlantic Ocean. Importantly, this flood coincided with the advent of the Younger Dryas, a 1,000-year global cold snap which began about 12,900 years ago. That's the most important thing. They do suggest here at the end that they're open to this possibility. In his quest for answers, though, he's found a new avenue to explore. About the time the Younger Dryas cooling period occurred, a comet seems to have collided with the Pleistocene ice sheet that dammed Lake Agassiz. And I would propose that one of those cometary impacts was right there. And it wasn't the draining of Lake Agassiz, it was the melting of this area right here by the impact that caused the huge floods that swept down into Lake Superior. So there's a closer up view, and you can really get a sense of the basin-like nature of the feature. Its raised rim in the southern quadrant, you can see, is highly dissected and channelized. It's in some of the channels, in a way, are almost remindful of the canyons we saw in Mesa Verde. They're shear walled, they're deep.
How thick would the ice have been right there at that time?
I'm going to guess probably somewhere between 2,000 and 4,000 feet. Maybe deeper. Maybe deeper. I wouldn't say it was more than a mile, though. And here's a colored digital elevation model of the lake where you can really begin to see this amazing plexus of erosional forms along the southern quadrant and the channels that water would have flowed out of. And here we see these islands are actually sediment that have splayed out from this erosion here.
So Randall, are you basically saying that a comet impact rapidly melted an ice sheet?
That's the hypothesis.
That is so cool.
And this is coming from somebody who has a degree in geology. All right?
And he makes
That's
great
good
sandwiches.
And a good cook.
Good sandwiches.
The other spillway would have been here. This is water would have spilled over this way and flowed into Hudson Bay. So I'm showing here the suggested outflow paths. The southern outlet trough bears all the marks of an extremely powerful catastrophic flood. Now, interestingly, I had been doing all this research and putting this together before I found the article about James Teller's work. So I had no dating on it. All I was going was for the geomorphology. It doesn't show up so good. Let's see here if I can get a better view of it.
See, it's the Black Sturgeon River. Were you searching for that before?
Thank you. Black Sturgeon River, that was it.
Yep.
Thank you.
So is that why it's bowl-shaped then from the impact? Or?
Yes, well,
Really?
yeah, that would be one of the key indicators there. Well, I'm sorry this is not showing up that good, but let's look at some of these, the topography of some of these features here. Oh, wait.
So is the idea to go to Lake Nipigon and find evidence of an impact that,
Yeah.
that proves it? So we went to Impact Crater recently
In Arizona.
in Arizona,
Yeah.
and they dug and searched and tried to prove for so long that it was an impact, but then they ended up finding out that everything that they thought should be there was vastly scattered.
Yeah.
So it just makes me think, you know, it might be a little more
And the problem here too is if you've got an impact into ice sheet with huge volumes of ice that then melt, and that melt water just floods over the region, it's going to obscure things quite a bit. But there's no question now at this point that there's catastrophic flooding. We have recessional cataracts here. They're all over the place. And we have these plucked cliffs that we talked about, and you learned about how the water flowing will pluck. So you've got, all of these are receding cliffs right here. There was a major flow that came down what is now the Black Sturgeon River, came down through here and left almost a coulee-like feature. Let's go to right here. And I actually remember being about 8 or 9 years old. We drove up with my dad, and somewhere along the way, he found an overlook. And I've looked on the maps, I haven't been able to find it, but he found an overlook on this Black Sturgeon River spillway. And I can still remember getting vertigo when I stood on the edge and I looked into this massive chasm here. Because this is really a very big feature. You know how we've been talking about the concept of an underfit river? Here's another beautiful example of it. So you had many erosional forms all in here where the surrounding material was washed away by the floods. We have channels. I mean, pretty much everything that we have streamlined forms in here that are shaped by the flowing water. All of these are indicative of giant floods. Let's go back to our slideshow. Okay, so this is near the southern end. So you have this, as it says, serenely beautiful today, scene of an extreme diluvial catastrophe circa 12,900. Here's an example of one of those erosional forms. It's tapered on the front, it's elongated. The axis of elongation is in the direction of current flow. And we can see features. Notice it right here. You see that's kind of that like a terrace, a mesa-like feature, just like we were seeing in the distance from Chimney Rock and Mesa Verde. You can see it right here. So yeah, floods, we can see flood channels carved here. We can see another one coming down here. like this. So this is the same image, digital relief map. Oop, the scale got a little different, but that's okay. You can see here, see this? That's it. That's what's called a streamlined erosional residual. And again, that's one of the things you look for is these shaped hills. So they're showing pathways of floodwater. Now, what I would be interested in is finding sediment piles and searching through sediment piles for things that look like either direct pieces of an impactor or impact-produced proxies. This is the view over Ruby Lake, and this is a channel that's been cut. Bear in mind, when you have catastrophic floods, you get enormous scouring and erosion. Many of the lakes, especially the ones like you'll see out in the scablands in eastern Washington and western Montana, are scour trough lakes. They're the puddles that are left in these deep scours after the intense erosion is over with, see? And that's exactly what this Ruby Lake is. Wow. Notice the cliffs, okay, so that you can kind of get a sense of what it looks like in the field.
Is that Brad?
What? No, but see, obviously we need Brad, but he needs to be right up here on the edge, with his toes curled over the edge.
That'll be Russ.
You know what we could do is attach some safety lines to you, Brad, and then we could Photoshop them out later. But so we're looking down this flood trough now. So these cliffs are basically 400 feet high. So this, again, before the flood, the land stretched across here unbroken. That's columnar basalt. Ruby Lake escarpment is an erosional product of the passage of floodwaters. Ruby Lake occupies a scour trough, a very typical feature found throughout mega flood carved landscapes. Very similar exposures occur through the channel scabland of Washington state that were created by Missoula floods. That's a Ruby Lake overlook. And I was thinking what could be really cool is if do any of you do high diving? No?
I would try it.
Not yet. I was talking about them wingsuits. Right?
Sleeping giant. This is an erosional form remnant that's known locally as the sleeping giant. And here we have a slot canyon. Notice, remember we did this, I was showing you how slot canyons form when you have a crack in the rock and it gets opened up by floods, and you end up with a deep canyon like this with straight walls. It's exactly what we have right here, a slot canyon. And there are numerous slot canyons that lead into Lake Superior. See, this is not slow, gradual erosion. This is something that happens in a geological instant. Slot canyons with sheer vertical walls created by the erosive passage of high-pressure floodwaters through pre-existing faults and fractures in the bedrock. And then we got a couple of canyons that show up here, and these are recessional cataract canyons. So what happens is the water is sweeping over. It's first comes as a sheet over the ground, and then it gets channelized. And once it gets channelized, it starts down cutting, and then once it's down cutted deep enough, the water flowing on the surface will then be captured by those channels. And then what will happen is the water, as it's focused into these channels, will eat its way headward or eat its way up current by plucking. Just like Niagara Falls is now doing at a much slower rate, right? But this is happening over a matter of days or maybe a few weeks. So these are the kind of channels that I'm interested in exploring. And from the ground, they look like this. This is examples of canyons formed where subglacial sheet floods become channelized, a typical process in flooding when a flow which is spread out becomes focused and confined to a channel. The focused flow subsequently cuts down below the pre-existing surface, simultaneously widening and deepening a pre-existing zone of bedrock weakness, such as a fracture or fault. And there's the mouth where it's opening out. So the floodwaters would have been coming out this way and then gushed out into this basin here, creating enormous amounts of sedimentary deposit as they did so. So these are the kinds of features that emanate from that southern quadrant of Lake Nipigon. And yeah, we can do some zip lining while we're there.
Oh yeah.
You're an expert at that, right, Ross?
I think so.
We can walk across this hanging bridge.
That's so fun. Wow.
And then we've talked some about the vorticity of highly turbulent water and how it creates potholes in the bedrock. So on the last day of our trip with Graham, we took him up to St. Croix Falls along the St. Croix River, which was in the pathway of this flood water, right? And in a constriction between two layers of basalt bedrock, the water was forced through, and it created these huge potholes, some of them 20 feet wide and 80 feet deep, that were produced by this. And again, literally overnight. They're not being formed now. Now they're just gradually, of course the Park Service will go in and clean them out sometimes. If you left them alone, they just fill up with stuff, and eventually that stuff would lithify and you wouldn't even know they were there. But here is a pothole. As it says, it's a Devil's Crater, is a testament to the incredible power and turbulence of the meltwater currents sweeping over the western rim of the Nipigon Basin. This is a gigantic pothole formed by colking in deep, swiftly moving floodwaters, in this case probably subglacial. And then there's a trough, an erosional trough emanating out from that. In fact, this may have even been a secondary, smaller impact that hit right here. And then once it gouges out the ice and possibly some of the bedrock, you're going to have a huge amount of inrushing water into that cavity, which is going to be highly turbulent, and then be able to, especially because if there's an impact, it's going to fracture the bedrock and make it easy to pull it out of there. And that's what we see right here. So I'm thinking this might be evidence of a smaller tandem impact. But here you can get a sense of the size of the thing by the canoe in there. The lake is about 220 feet deep. The crater walls are about 220 feet in height, making the full depth of the pothole about 440 feet. With a width of about 660 feet, this has to be one of the supreme examples of vorticular cavitation on Earth. Note canoeists for scale. You up for that, Gage?
100%.
100%. All right, man. Cool. So here, I don't know why it's so bright, but yeah, here you see the Black Sturgeon spillway. Water flow is from upper left to lower right. Toggle to the next slide to see additional flow paths. And here is an oblique Google Earth view of the spillway. And you can see the modern river in it is minuscule compared to the size of the channel. Another example of your, what is it, Graham?
I can't remember.
A what?
I can't remember.
Scale variance, underfit.
Underfit river. Underfit river. So here's that one, and then this is comparing, check this out, Brandon, Moses Coulee.
Yeah.
So here's a side-by-side comparison at the same scale of the Black Sturgeon Spillway and Moses Coulee. Moses Coulee, as it says here, Moses Coulee ranks as one of the most magnificent ancient megaflood spillways on Earth, carrying at its greatest discharge over 300 million cubic feet per second of raging torrential floodwater. Black Sturgeon Spillway is about half the capacity of Moses Coulee, but is still a very impressive example of a relic channel cut by gigantic water flows that far exceed anything on Earth today. So somewhere in here, when I was about 8 years old, I was standing with my dad looking into this thing and getting vertigo. Only many years later because I always remembered that. And only many years later did I put it together. Oh, right. So there's my proposed ground zero for cosmic impact. Now, of course, this is, at this point, purely hypothetical. But if you take this away, then the explanation for the catastrophic flooding, the existence of the deep basin, and all these other features, there's no explanation for it, really. So that is a trip that I would very much like to do. And there's amazing country around there, and there are lodges for rent. And really, I'm thinking even 4 days would be enough. Maybe take a day to arrive, 4 days to explore, collect samples, maybe 5 days.
Good.
So that's one idea.
Randall, usually what you look for in impact sites is shock cores.
Shock cores.
It's a large part of it. Do you think the ice sheet was too thick to do any sort of that action? Like, is the data just melted?
That's the problem. See, we're looking at a whole new definition for impact cratering when we start talking about the effects of impacts into ice sheets. And we should not expect to find something like the classic crater in Arizona. Because if that crater in Arizona, when that struck, there was 3,000 feet of ice over it, it wouldn't have looked like it looks now.
Yeah. It's hard to imagine it'd even make it to the earth, 3,000 feet of ice.
It does.
So that's just about the Nipigon proposed trip. Then the other one is this. That's not it. That would be on it. Here we go. This one. Now, your first impression might be, holy grail, well, that's a completely, totally different, separate area of interest, right? No, it ain't. It's definitely not. And if we had another day, we would go through this program, but since we don't.
What?
What?
We're just gonna cut it off right there.
Right.
Cut it off at the knees, yep.
Tune in next week, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah. After I show you the quote that says, "Don't search the Holy Grail."
That's right.
Still want to do some Q&A though, right?
It's terrifying, it will kill you.
Really
Yeah.
No man may
We're not gonna just cut it off, so, yeah, let's have a few minutes of Q&A or comments or whatever.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Related or unrelated?
Well, I have a question about what we saw on this trip. The when you showed us the slide of one of those houses that the sun was shining through the window onto that ledge.
Yeah?
Like, especially with you being a master builder and all that, you must have thought about how they would actually construct that. Like, how would they do that with, getting that? I mean, obviously you could just build it and have the sun shine in on anything, and then figure out where the sun's shining in, and then build.
Well,
whatever
like,
you
if
want
we're
to
gonna
that,
build
but, like,
something, like this project that I'm going back to, if you go there and you look on this site, it's all staked out. We've simply driven stakes in the ground. So you'd have to do observations. You would, just as we do in building, we will build the whole thing first. We'll use what's called our batter boards. And then we'll lay the whole thing out in string, which we call building lines, right? So we can orient that any way we want. And of course, we use surveyor's transits to get everything lined up exactly. But you can do the same thing quite precisely with geometry. So it would not be a big deal to, for example, on the summer solstice sunrise, to set a stick in the ground and mark its shadow and set a second stick in the ground and then lay out your temple around that line. So as the temple is being built up out of the masonry, you're building it up with that alignment already laid out. So you're building the thing around your preferred alignment.
Okay.
If we could get back to the Younger Dryas here for a moment, I had a two-part question.
Sure.
When we get to the cooling episode at the beginning of the Younger Dryas, it's proposed that one of the main effects is that the meltwater pulse 1A releases so much water that it disrupts the Gulf Stream. But when we get to the end of the Younger Dryas, it seems like meltwater pulse 1B is actually larger. So wouldn't that disrupt the Gulf Stream further, but then we suddenly see it revert back to...
Well, the disruption of the Gulf Stream was invoked to explain why the northern latitudes in northern Europe suddenly plunged back into much more severe cold. And that could be part of it, but maybe also part of it, see if there was an impact, then there are multiple factors we have to consider. Apparently, if we had more time, we would go through this Younger Dryas stuff in much more detail.
Yeah.
But there's evidence of major wildfires. You've got huge, thick deposits of ammonium nitrates in the Greenland ice cores dating right to that period that are associated with platinum and iridium deposits. So apparently there were large-scale fires. There was probably injection of dust. See, one of the things with injection of a lot of water into the atmosphere, simultaneous with dust, you know that rain requires a nucleus to precipitate out. That's why they do cloud seeding, right? They provide little tiny particles for the water, the moisture to nucleate around, and then it falls to earth, right? Well, in an impact like we're talking about here, you would simultaneously have injection of particulate matter and water vapor into earth, which would create the ideal conditions for a gigantic torrential rainout. So here the hypothesis would probably be that you have initially fires that would then be quenched by the subsequent rainfall over the next weeks as all of that water vapor lofted into the atmosphere would rain out. And with that extra inclusion of particulate matter, yeah, you could have some pretty extreme rainfalls. And that's what I would be looking for here. A lot of the areas in the Southwest were not heading directly onto the great ice sheets, but there is clearly evidence of gigantic floods throughout the Southwest. Yeah, Gage?
As an add-on to that, do you think the impacts, like, because the KT impact activated the Siberian traps, the lava fields there?
KT would have, if it triggered volcanism, it would have been the Deccan traps.
Deccan traps, yeah.
Right, in India. Now,
the one
there's...
that you're talking about could have triggered that same volcanic activity that would have then triggered more rainfall.
Yes. Which, so an event like this could trigger a whole cascading effect of secondary consequences that could literally take a millennium or two to play out. See, and that's part of the problem why the simple-minded, models that are attacked by a lot of the critics just look at this very like, oh, an impact, well, everything should have died all at once. Well, no, you would have animals that died in the consequence of the initial impact, but in the secondary consequences playing out perhaps over centuries, which would have included volcanism, feedback processes from all the meltwater rushing into the oceans. Basically what you see there is climate chaos for a period of quite some time.
Is it possible there were more than one impact?
Pardon me?
Is it possible there was more than one impact?
Now, Brandon just asked something, and I'm leaning very strongly in the direction that there was maybe 7 or 8 impacts. Again, based upon geomorphological evidence like I just showed you here.
What could the additional ones have been in the Carolina Bays?
That's an interesting question. We better not go there. You've all heard of the Carolina Bays, right? If you read Magicians of the Gods, you'll learn about the Carolina Bays. So if you haven't read it, damn it, read it.
Yeah, and the Cosmic Tusk.
Cosmic Tusk, yeah. Go to the Cosmic Tusk website for sure.
I was also wondering, what is your preferred theory on the termination of the Younger Dryas? I know you had mentioned the interesting correlations between comets and solar activity.
Yes. Yes. Phrase that question again.
What do you find to be the most likely answer for the end of the Younger Dryas? Because that seems to be equally as cataclysmic.
That's a very interesting question. That's the 11,600 year date. And so 11,600, interestingly, was the date that Plato gives for the subsidence of Atlantis, 9,000 years before the exile of Solon in Egypt. So Plato was actually pinpointing that date, 2,300 and some years ago. And now we find that that's precisely the date for meltwater pulse 1b. And that's what ended the Younger Dryas. The Younger Dryas lasted about 1,300 years, and the end of it was a huge meltwater pulse. And what triggered that? I don't know. That's the quick answer.
I'm working on it.
Alan?
Sorry.
Are any of the flooding zones or washouts that we've seen here the result of the end of the Younger Dryas, or do you think they're more the beginning?
That we've seen here? I really don't know. I don't have enough data on dating. And see, now with cosmogenic radionuclide dating of rock surfaces, maybe we'll get some dates for, like, when we saw those cliff exposures in Mesa Verde. The question is, how long have those cliffs been exposed? Because prior to the erosion that dissected the surface of that plateau, they were all underground and they were completely insulated from cosmic ray bombardment. Once the floods come through, inside those channels, expose that sandstone, it is now subject to being bombarded with cosmic rays, and that creates a whole secondary consequences of isotopes that can be measured.
Is that the same technique they used to study, like that they found the extra chamber in the pyramid?
Oh, yeah.
No, that's the muon.
Muons.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, I think that's different.
That's different.
I want to show you just the climate graph from the Greenland ice cores where the Younger Dryas event really jumps out. So what we got here is oxygen isotopes from the Greenland ice core. This is thousands of years, so we've got, this is 10,000 years ago, right? I think when we were talking to Van today, we were talking about the Goddess Age, and I said that there was one interruption at about 8,300, which is right here. There was a 4-degree global cooling. That right there, suddenly, very quick. So this is essentially the Holocene, the modern epoch that we are now in. The epoch in which the megafauna are gone down here, the ice is gone here, civilization begins in here, agriculture, domestication of animals, dispersion of languages, all of that is happening in this, right? And so what happens is shifts to the left are cooling, shifts to the right are warming. First thing I want you to notice is there's no point throughout the last 10,000 years where the climate isn't oscillating back and forth 1, 2, and 3 degrees. Constantly oscillating, right? And I'm turning it sideways here so you can see that what's actually happening here, there's that 8,200 year, 8,300 year cold snap. This was the era of the goddess right here. And then in this you get into the neoglaciation, where you can see the average trend now has gone down, looking at that, the green line there, right? Also notice the magnitude of the oscillations has gotten greater as the climate has gotten cooler. So here the green line that you see here represents the temperature now. So you can see that during this period, which is called the climatic optimum, it's almost all above, warmer than now, warmer than now. This is showing cooler than now, cooler, warmer, cooler, you see. What this shows is a highly oscillating climate. It does not show a steady state climate. Now here it is again. Now what I'm going to do is we're going to go back into the Ice Age, and we're going to look at the magnitude of some of the climate changes that have occurred during this time. And again, bear in mind now, the climate since the end of the Little Ice Age has warmed 1 degree centigrade, which is now causing a nervous breakdown amongst a lot of people, right? And they're saying, climate has never changed this fast before. Are you sure? Be sure of what you're talking about, because now we're going to go back into the Ice Age, and you're going to see the norm for climate before the Holocene.
Oof. It was a real hell scheduling cat during that time.
Probably better that I didn't hear that remark. Check that out. What's the story? What are the implications of this when we start talking about climate change? If somebody says to me, the climate change science is settled, the first thing I say is, explain that. If you can't explain that, then get the hell out of here. It isn't settled.
Do you have CO2 levels with that?
We do have, well, now we get into another complicated discussion about how we determine ancient CO2 levels, which is an interesting discussion in itself, which we can do. Maybe we can do that on a Zoom conference.
I would say that the way the I don't know, dynamic changes in the Ice Age eras kind of suggest that maybe advanced civilization is not much older than that after all, because that would be incredibly difficult to live in.
Yes, it would.
Through, for civilizations that need to live for long periods of time.
Yeah. Yeah, it raises a lot of questions. And see, here's the first attempt to get out of the Ice Age, and it didn't succeed. Look, temperatures came up almost right to the modern, but then it plunged right back into full glacial cold during the Younger Dryas. And here's the second. So here you have the two great meltwater pulses, 1A and 1B. The second attempt brought it up in a catastrophic rise in temperature, just as in here, but this time it managed to get on up out of the Ice Age. And I don't know why. I don't know what was the difference between here, where it didn't pull the planet out of the Ice Age, but here it did. Another one of the many accumulating questions. Yeah, Bob, Bill, Bob, Bill. Billy Bob.
I wanted to, Alan over here, Alan too.
No.
No, I'm Alan. I'm Alan too. No, you're Alan 3.
No, but he mentioned that he couldn't understand civilizations living in that highly fluctuated period. But I say the megalithic builders, civilization, survived in that because they all lived along the equator, from Angkor Wat to Egypt to Machu Picchu. They all hugged that equator, the warm area. And so I think they survived it and they lived in it. And
well, that's very plausible. Although there was no Angkor Wat then. Angkor Wat came 10,000 years after this. But in that region, in that area, yeah.
I'm also thinking that Angkor Wat was not built by Jayavarman I, but it was built by the megalithic builders, and he discovered it.
Okay, sure.
Wasn't Angkor built on an older temple?
Probably.
So it could have, I think that's what we're getting at.
Yeah. Here I've enlarged it just a little bit so you can see a little bit clearer. This is the Younger Dryas here. And it's not Younger Dryas. It's Younger Dryas. I keep hearing people say, the Younger Dryas. No.
That was a joke.
I've seen some graphs. It's interesting how they can manipulate the data. I've seen some graphs from the proponents of the anthropogenic global warming, and they show that steady phase there that you've got, which is still going up and down there, and it's just this long, like very.
Yeah, I've seen that. That's bullshit. Yeah. To put it succinctly, that's bullshit.
Yeah.
How much of the Earth would be warm in that period?
Well, the whole Earth, because, glaciers shrank everywhere, including New Zealand.
No, but even in that ice age, there had to be times on Earth, or places on Earth that were still warm.
Oh, yeah, and that's what Bill was saying. As you get into the equatorial regions, and I'll tell you another area that might have been really the ideal place for the evolution of a civilization would have been, an island complex in the mid-Atlantic Ocean.
Which is closer to the equator, not that far from it.
Here.
CAC 2020.
What?
How long do we need to be there to find out?
I like places near the
Get your scuba diving license.
I will.
May I,
Well, we need probably a week to explore some of the islands, and then whether we flew or sailed. Alan, can you check into cruise ship rentals? Hire a pilot to sail us amongst the islands?
Can we get like an old Cold War era submarine?
No Tesla, can we get his?
Well, you work on that,
I'll work on the
Brian.
submarine.
You work on the submarine.
Down deep to
Alan
find
can
the
get us a sailboat. I'll
Talk
learn how
to
to
James
dive.
Cameron.
We're good to
His name is James Cameron.
Okay, here's when these ice cores were first being extracted and analyzed. This is some of the commentary that shows up in the scientific press. All right, this is from mainstream science now. Ice records drilled previously indicate the climate can sometimes fluctuate with surprising speed. In particular, studies of the Greenland Ice Sheet Project 1 core drilled from 79 to 81 in southeastern Greenland suggest that the North Atlantic region warmed by a striking 7 degrees in a half a century. So go back a half a century, where does that put us? The late 60s, early 70s? Now, we're talking about since then, the climate has warmed by perhaps a quarter of a degree.
And that's 7 degrees Celsius, isn't it?
Yes, which would be about, about 12 degrees Fahrenheit. That drastic warming far outpaces what the world is currently experiencing. And yet, over and over and over again, you'll hear them say, the climate has never changed this fast before. That really surprised us that things could happen so quickly, says James White of the University of Colorado at Boulder, a participant in JISP 1 and 2. Now, a little bit further analysis of these ice cores showed greater precision, so they were able to refine the span of time over which these huge oscillations of climate occurred, and this is what they found out. From measurements of annual ice layer thickness over the past 15 years, the authors find that Greenland's climate, emerging from the last ice age, twice shifted from glacial to interglacial conditions over an astonishingly quick 3 to 5 years.
Wow.
We're talking about 15 to 18 degrees Fahrenheit over 3 to 5 years. But the climate has never warmed as fast as it has today. You see why I get frustrated? Yeah. So this is a graph taken from deep sea cores that shows the rate at which melting glaciers contributed water to the ocean basins. Here's meltwater pulse 1A, meltwater pulse 1B. This is the range, still within the precision of dating, which has actually come a long way since this is a 20, 25-year-old graph. But you can see there was a massive pulse of meltwater at the beginning of the Younger Dryas, a massive pulse of meltwater at the ending. In this interim, Clovis culture disappears, megafauna disappears.
Wow.
Randall, does I can't remember if you talked about this before, but does that massive pulse, those massive pulses of fresh water into the ocean change the salinity? Does that have any effect?
Change the salinity?
Yeah.
Yes, it does.
Is that
The more saline the water, the more dense.
Right.
So what it'll do is it'll come out onto the ocean to freshwater, and it'll create a freshwater lid that can then interrupt the thermohaline circulation.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
It does, thank you.
Is that the mechanism that was graphed in that previous graph there?
Pardon me?
The salinity effects that you were just talking about, was that the mechanism that was graphed in that previous one there?
In
The green spike next to it?
Yeah.
no,
that's the dating.
What that was showing was the range of that was the error bar.
Oh, gotcha.
See, back when this was first proposed, they were still refining the dates. So they said, for example, meltwater pulse 1A, youngest possibility was here, latest was here. So somewhere between these two, that was the error bar.
Randall,
Yes, Bill?
but from listening to you, this hypothesis I take from you, but I believe that the warm-up from the bottom of the Younger Dryas, the warm-up,
Yeah.
I believe they came from bolide impacts on ice, which created a hothouse greenhouse effect, and threw the water in that started the raining.
Yes. And in fact, that principle would also apply if the bolide impacts were into the oceans.
Right.
Same thing, you would get a canopy of water vapor, which is the most effective greenhouse gas. And that could create a temporary runaway warming that would then trigger feedback loops that would cause more warming, and perhaps that's what it would take to inaugurate this set of feedbacks.
And what takes the temperature down are bolide impacts into the ground.
Into the ground.
Create a
yes.
nuclear winter and cool things down.
Give me a high five, Bill. Yeah. Maybe we'll end with this graph. This is actually an older version of a graph that we've updated quite a bit. But as I've been going through the literature, studying various catastrophic events in Earth history, I've begun cataloging these events that seem to be powerful enough. The criteria I have used is how extreme of an event would it require to basically pull the plug on modern civilization and put us back into a Stone Age existence. So that's the criteria I used to get each one of these events on this timeline. I took it back here to earliest modern humans, 150 to 160, so you can tell this is an old graph because now it's been bumped as far back as 180. Wow. But if you look here, the Greenland blips at 104,000. The Toba super eruption and near extinction of humans, 72,000, which has actually been now redated to 74,000. Heinrich event, 65,000. Heinrich event. These are massive discharges of glacial ice into the global oceans, and they would have a very powerful effect on the Gulf Stream. And I don't have enough time to talk about, just they are powerful events. If you notice some of the dating, onset of late Wisconsin Ice Age, 26,000 years before present. What is that close to that we talked about?
That's
the precessional cycle. So the onset of the late Wisconsin Ice Age began one precessional cycle ago. Precessional cycle and a half, 39. Two precessional cycles, 52. Add another half precessional cycle, 65. Four precessional cycles, 104. So can we use such a graph as this possibly as a predictive tool? Maybe. In this graph, here's the beginning of recorded history, the red bar. 6,000 years before present.
And maybe you'll find that the sun's micronova cycle.
Yeah, there's a lot of new stuff that could be added to this. And I actually do have an updated version of this. So I think we'll stop there. Do you think you've gotten enough stuff to think about for the time being? Or do you need more? No, I think it's time to
digest.
Digest and boogie down, right?
And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. And we are back, ladies and gentlemen, finally from the Contact the Cabin 2019 trip.
Extravaganza.
Phenomenal. So amazing. And everybody should go next time.
Yeah. We are back in the 10 by 10 by 10 Tangent Cube.
Yeah.
In Texas. Yeah, we had a great time.
It was so awesome.
So we wanted to make sure we mentioned that this whole thing was Darren's brainchild.
Yeah, from Grimerica.
Right, Darren from Grimerica. He was awesome, hilarious guy.
Yeah.
Constantly.
Yeah, thanks, buddy.
Yeah.
From the bottom of our hearts,
Yeah.
from the bottom of our serpentine hearts, we thank you.
Don't snakes have like 3 hearts? From the bottom of every one of our serpentine hearts. Yeah, we thank you and Graham.
Yeah.
You guys put on a fantastic event. Charles was the hub around which all of it, he was the coordinator.
Yeah, he was in contact with like 75 people.
Yeah.
Who were guests on that event.
Yeah. We also would like to mention Brandon Powell,
Oh yeah.
Who was who like every morning we would get up.
Belly, chest, and head.
Let go. Was doing the Wim Hof breathing techniques for us every morning, and man, that stuff was awesome. Kind of really woke everybody up, gave you a rush, sort of set the energy level for the day. We also went to the Pagosa hot springs with him, and
oh my gosh,
got in the
crazy.
freezing cold river while it was snowing, and then stayed in there as long as we could without dying, and then got out and ran over to one of the hot springs and got in there and like, it was crazy awesome.
Lobster pot.
The lobster pot, yeah. Straight from like below 40-degree water into the lobster pot, which is like 116 or something like that.
114.
Yeah, 114. So
yeah, thanks, Brandon. Man, that was
Brandon was awesome, and he had to leave a couple of days early. And
also jammed out with us.
Yeah,
you know,
he did.
with
He had his old he had his djembe, and he rocked out with us. And
great voice too, buddy.
Great voice. He could do some chanting, singing stuff. It was really awesome. It was fun to talk to, and we might get him and his brother on the show at some point in the future. We talked about that a lot. Yeah. Also, Cameron, who runs the Sacred Geometry International website for Randall. He was awesome. He was there, took a lot of videos, very energetic, great guy. Had a lot of fun talking to him. And
most amazing cell phone contraptions I've ever seen in my life.
I was like, why don't you just have a camera? Like he had all these his cell phones like floating in this gimbal arrangement with like a fluffy microphone thingy and like a special lens on it. And I was like, dude, just buy a fucking camera. But no,
it was awesome.
Like directly connected to his phone. It was awesome. So he was really cool too. It was great to meet him. I told him his website's been blowing my mind for years. And we talked about maybe doing some stuff also in the future. So thanks to both of you guys, Brandon and Cameron. Yep. You guys were great. Too bad you had to leave a little bit early, but you guys were fantastic to hang out with. So thank you so much.
Yeah. Can't wait till we see y'all next time.
That's right.
And also Renee and Tamara.
Yes.
Authors of The Emissary and The Emerald Tablet, the
One Great Year series. It's a fictionalized series. I think it's going to be a trilogy. These are they gave us copies of the first two. They're beautiful. They're fictionalized things about the One Great Year, and basically they sort of incorporate a bunch of the stuff that Randall teaches about, that Graham Hancock talks about. So they're trying to like sort of tell this story in a fictional fashion, sort of like what Graham was doing with some of his books, his fiction books.
Yeah.
So they actually gave us copies of book 1 and 2. Book 3, they said, is going to come out soon. But yeah, so on the back it says, when the world collapses from a golden age into one of chaos and strife, mankind's salvation lies in the hands of the eternal emissaries, guardians chosen to protect the secrets of a sacred, ancient civilization and to guide humanity back to enlightenment, even as its darkest hour approaches.
Yeah, that's cool.
So it's
I've always wanted to see like or have somebody make a movie or something that incorporates all of this stuff. Well, they did it in book form, and I think they're in
the process
of trying to get some screenwriting done and maybe get a movie deal.
Right.
So that would be freaking awesome.
Yep. So they were there in the
Good luck to you guys.
They were there in the third trimester. They were freaking hilarious and awesome to hang out with, and gave us copies of the book. So I can't wait. I'm going to start reading them here pretty quickly.
Thanks for the notes that you wrote to me in the books.
Yeah, it basically says, "Dear Kyle, I know you won't read this book.
Give it to Russ, please." I really need to get the audio version. I think there's an audio version for the book 1.
Yeah.
But I was thinking about maybe just really challenging myself and be like,
just crack it open
sit down
and see if
and
you can do
learn how to read.
All right. Yep. Thanks, guys, so much. And maybe we can get you on at some point to talk about it once I've gotten into it, maybe through the first one and into the second one. So, also check out geocosmicrex.com. That's Brad Young's website for a bunch of Randall stuff. But mostly you want to check out the YouTube channels. Just look up Geocosmic Rex on YouTube. Got tons and tons of Randall videos from across the years.
Heck yes.
Dropping knowledge all over the place. So Geocosmic Rex on YouTube or geocosmicrex.com for the website. Also would like to mention Keith and Gage, who did all the cooking. They were fantastic, even though they're fired.
Yeah.
They're fired.
They both got fired from that kitchen multiple times.
Multiple times. I mean, I walked in and fired them, pretty much. You guys don't have Fruit Loops, you're fucking fired.
They fired me pretty much every time I walked in there too.
Yeah. Everyone got fired from the kitchen. Keith and Gabe were great. Yeah. So, I mean, those guys were waking up at frickin', who knows, 5 o'clock in the morning or earlier to have lunch or have breakfast ready for everybody.
As soon as they were done cooking breakfast, they started preparing lunch.
Right. So that we could eat breakfast and then walk out the door with a packed lunch, every one of us, each time. And it was amazing.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much. Thanks to all the guests, everyone we met there. You guys are all awesome.
So awesome.
Got many new contacts. Hope to get a lot of interviews out of it. We met some really cool people that we're definitely going to be bringing on the show. And we want to do this again.
Yeah.
Every, couple of months.
Yes.
So yes, there are many future things planned. We had an excellent planning session at some point, and look for good things in the future because that should be happening.
Yeah.
So.
All right. Thanks a lot, everybody. Sorry we didn't get anything published during the week last week. It was just so busy. We thought we would. We had the podcast equipment set up down there for days and days and days, but
yeah,
it was just one thing after another. I'm glad we pulled it together to do that little roundtable discussion that we did. That was great.
Yeah.
Everybody crowded around the room. All the guests were down there. It was just a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was awesome. It was like doing it in front of a live audience.
Yeah.
It was really
cool.
It was.
It was cool.
Kyle had all this equipment set up and it was connected to a big flat screen TV in there. And then there was like a circle of couches and Kyle put mics up around all the couches and we all sat, Randall and Brad and Charles and Graham and Kyle and I and Adam were all sitting around the couches, and then all the guests from the third trimester were around us, around the outside of the couches and all the way up the stairs. So they all participated, and you could hear them catcalling in the background there while we were saying stuff. So it was fantastic.
It was really great.
It was a little difficult to pull together because every day was so busy, so I'm glad we finally did it at the very end. It's too bad we couldn't record more. But it was just really, really busy. And the other thing is we couldn't publish it while we were there because the internet was practically non-existent and nobody had cell phone service either. So
and we had a huge list of things we had to get done before we left the next day. So.
Right. Yeah. So we just decided to pack up the studio, bring it back to the Tangent Cube, and finish it out here, which is what we're doing right now.
Yeah. So thanks everybody for your patience, and hopefully we'll see you on the next trip.
That's right. And look for a future podcast from us. We are getting back onto our regular schedule. Got some good guests coming up, and of course, as always, the musings from your favorite serpents,
snakes. Yeah, send us an email, brothersoftheserpent@gmail.com. Check out the website there, brothersoftheserpent.com. Get your snake skins. Snake skins of all types and patterns.
That's right.
Rattlesnake skins, not available yet.
Maybe we should do that. It's just like a bodysuit, freaking rattlesnake skin.
Comment on the website or on the blog or on iTunes or wherever you can comment on the shows. Check out the encyclopedia and the glossary on the website.
That's right.
Very handy.
Yeah.
Handy tools there.
Yeah, people are actually mentioning it to us at the conference. They were like, oh yeah, the encyclopedia, man. It's freaking awesome. So use that. Also follow us on Twitter at Snake Bros with no vowels, SNKBRS. We are active on Twitter, and that's the only social media we have, so please follow us there.
Yeah. And share the shows and donate to our pyramid scheme.
That's right.
Send us 1 rupee every minute for the next 15 years.
We also have a Patreon. It is up. It is in its beginning phase. I haven't really done any other setups. I think there's a couple of payment plans. So if anyone's interested in doing that, there's a few Pi 3.14 every month or whatever. So there is a Patreon. You can look us up there, Brothers of the Serpent on Patreon. And that is also going
part of the pyramid scheme.
That's right.
Send us straight to pyramids.
That's right. And give us reviews anywhere you can. iTunes, Podbean, anywhere you can. So that helps a lot. Also, don't forget about History Shift. He is, if you are watching this on YouTube, this is his work putting this video together. If you're just listening to it, go check out the video because he is going to be putting Randall's the video from the presentation in the video for our YouTube channel. So it's going to be awesome. Thanks to him. Also, he goes on glacial erratic and dolmen hunts in Montana, and he wants hiking buddies. So get a hold of him on Twitter at History Shift if you want to do that. Also follow him on Twitter just because he's awesome. And you can also find his YouTube channel, History Shift, on YouTube, where he posts lots of interesting things, and he's got a whole library of other people's stuff saved about interesting stuff. And Henry Havlack on Instagram, you can follow him at hhavlack. Also, his website is hermetica.bigcartel.com. He is a big supporter of the show. He is helping us out by sharing our shows on his Instagram channel, which has been helping a lot. I noticed a big boost from him doing that. Thanks, buddy. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Yep. That's about it. We had a blast. Thanks to all you CAC peeps.
Thanks, Darren and Graham.
Darren and Graham.
Check out Grimerica.
Randall and Brad.
Grimerica.ca/support.
That's right. Grimerica.ca/support.
Support the show.
Support the show.
Be nice in the chats.
Carve yourself off a mammoth burger.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Good night, and I move. Get back to work.
See you next week.
That's right.